So exporting, how do we export this and get it ready for print? So one thing we want to do is we want to go through and do a couple of pre-flight checks. Pre-flight just means we're just checking everything before we go to press or pre-press, however you want to kind of label it. You can call it kind of a pre-press check. Just make sure everything is aligned properly. You can toggle on your W. Everything looks great. There's nothing that's going to go past the bleed or any kind of vital text that's going to be in this bleed area. We're just double checking and making sure everything looks good. Check our colors and make sure all of our colors, of course we already did the color swatches, so we know all of our colors all are the same across the entire document, and so is our type choices as well because we set all that up ahead of time. Another thing to do is check your cover and just make sure you don't have any text that's going to be in that bleed area, because that's all going to be trimmed off in the printing process, that whole little section, this little area right here. So just make sure nothing is important there and everything is lined up. Toggle off W. So let's say we've gone through everything and it's great. There's another thing I like to check before I export anything for print or digital, and that's to go down here to this little area. It says no errors. This is kind of your pre-flight panel, and sometimes you'll have an error and it'll be red. So we're going to go click this pre-flight panel. Let's go ahead and click on the top option. It's going to tell us if there's any errors with the colors that we've chosen, if there's any errors with overflow text not showing, if there's any errors with fonts that can't be packaged or sent with the file. All of these errors are going to come up here, and you can knock them off one by one. So if you have a whole list of errors, you can address each one as it comes. So for example, let's say I have some overflow text, and this happens all the time, is you have this overflow box and say it got moved by accident, and now we're going to click up here and 2 lines of copy are now disappeared and you can't see it. This is called overflow text. And look, there's all of a sudden this error that appeared. We could do a drop down, overset text is not showing text frame. You can double click and it's going to take you right to that area. So let's say I'm on another page and I go, oh, there's an error. Okay, so there's some text that's not showing. Let me double click the text frame. Oh, there it is. So let me uncollapse it. I would have cut off 2 lines of this person's letter and that would have looked really bad. So those kind of issues happen, and some font issues happen where maybe there's a font that has a license, and let's say you don't have the license and it's not allowing you to export that font without a license. Those type of issues too come up. So now that I've done a pre-flight check, there's no errors. I've already made sure everything is has a bleed. Everything bleeds to the edge. The printer's going to want that. And everything's aligned. I'm ready to go ahead and export this as a PDF. So let's go ahead and go to File, Export. File, Export. And I'm going to do a PDF print. So you have a lot of options here, but let's do PDF print. And so they have some preset options here, and I like to do the high quality print. There's also one called press quality. That's another great one to do. Let's stick with press quality since this is going to be sent to the professional printer to be printed. Let's do press quality. We want to make sure we export this as pages and not as spreads. You would think it makes sense to export as spreads so they can trim it off, but in reality, this is a little bit complicated, but the printer doesn't actually print your pages in order. They print them in sheets and stack them and fold them. So in a way, they need to have them as single pages. And this is just something I've learned over time. So we're going to do pages. We're not going to do spreads. This is the exporting options. Everything else stays the same. We're not going to touch a whole lot. So that's all we did, is we made sure it's on pages. Just double check. This is all, if you're on the press quality, everything's great. We want to make sure it's at 300 ppi or pixels per inch. Marks and bleed, this is another one we may need to change. So what I like to do is I like to click on crop marks only. I find when I include bleed marks, registration marks, printers ignore it or they don't really need it. So one thing I've done with print work is I just click on crop marks. They like to see that. Sometimes when you do magazine ads, they don't like crop marks, but we're doing the entire publication, so we definitely need crop marks here. And we want to make sure we use the document bleed settings, which we set up in the beginning of the document, which is the 0.125, which is 1/8 of an inch. That's standard in the United States, and then there's different measurements in Europe and other parts of the world that don't use inches. So let's do output. We're not going to change anything. None of this changes. So all we did was we made sure it's single pages. And we made sure there's crop marks and bleed. That's it. Now we're going to export. And we can also save the preset if we ever want to save our own. So we can do print, final, if you want to save your preset, and now you have everything marked. So now when you export the document in the future, you just do print file and you don't have to sit there and do what we just did. You could just do that over and over again. So let's export. So let's open up our PDF. We can see the crop marks right here. That's these lines right here. Perfect. Let's do this so we can see all of our pages and zoom out. And this is when I like to zoom in and zoom out to make sure there's not any final errors. So I'm going to show you what a final document will look like. This is single pages, and you have crop marks on each page. The printer's going to want that because they're going to reorder the pages so that they could print it the way they need to print it on big sheets and fold it. And it's not going to be perfectly in order, and that's why they need to have these separate pages so they can shift it around in the order they need for their printers to print it in the order that you want it to. So I know that sounds complicated, but it's kind of the process that they need to have it in. So you'll see this little issue here. Let's go ahead and zoom in 100%. This is a little bit from the other side of the document. So you'll see this little issue here, and this is not really too much of an issue, but it's something so you don't worry about it. This is from the left side of the spread, and we're doing single pages, so it's cutting it right here. That's okay, as long as it looks like it's even when you export it. So let's go here. As long as it looks good and right up to the edge here, you're good to go. This is the way how it exports as single pages, because it's adding that bleed. It's ready to go. Sometimes they like you to export your front cover and your back cover as a separate document, because sometimes they like to have, if you're going to have a continuous cover, and we talked about this when we did the book cover, the romance novel book cover project, where we talked about the front and the back being one continuous kind of jacket. And that's usually the same thing here. So you'd send the center in, and that's only if you're going to be doing like a book. If you're going to be doing a magazine, then you can totally get away with this. But if you want to have a continual cover that has a spine, so basically anything that doesn't have a spine, you don't need to do that. But if it has a spine and it has a back and it's a separate jacket like a book, then you will need to provide that separate document where you have the front, you have the back, and you have the spine, which we set up in Adobe Photoshop for the romance novel. And you'd send that as just a second document so they can have that, and they can have all these inside pages as well. So that's all good and great, and we were able to get this as a printed book, but let's say we want to have this as a downloadable digital document. We don't want to print it. We want to give it, have it available for people to download and use the recipes in a digital PDF. So it'd be very simple to switch it around. We might have to do some tweaks and modifications to it. So let's say we have this welcome. So what we want to do is we want to go up this, we'll go ahead and save this as our print one. And let's save this as a separate file because we're going to have to do some tweaks. So cookbook class, let's say digital. Let's go to file. We're going to go to document setup, and we are going to click off facing pages. So now it's going to be single pages, no more spreads, because you don't want to have a digital PDF be a spread because it's kind of hard to zoom in and read for spreads. So click OK. It's going to make everything as single pages, so when people look through the PDF, it'll look just like this. So obviously there's tweaks we can make to this. So I think that has a master, and let's go ahead and get rid of that master. It doesn't really need one because that one is not one of our masters we need. So it's as simple as just doing some tweaks like this, just to kind of make it kind of made for these single pages. So that looks great, and we could even reverse these. So what we're going to do is I'm going to reverse these pages because I want to show the end result first and then the recipe second. So we're going to go up to page 4. We're just reversing this, or maybe let me go down to page 5, the photo, and let's drag that above page 4. So now we have the recipe, and then now we have the recipe here. And so what we could do is, this is digital, we're just going to have to do some modifications to make it work. I'm taking this top header and I'm going to paste it on this page. So paste in place, just so those are connected. Since they're going to be on separate pages, people scroll through, they can connect those two. So just little small tweaks we can make. Same thing here, that's already first. So it might take, an hour or two to adapt this to digital, but it's not going to really take too much time. You're just making some tweaks to it to make it a digital PDF. So let's say I go through the recipes, I do that in about an hour, and I'm ready to export. So I can go to File, Export, and instead of print, we're going to do interactive. This is their digital settings, or digital version is interactive. And we are going to do all pages, and you can export instead of spreads. We want to export as pages. And you can even create separate PDF files as well. We're not going to really touch anything here. Just going to go down to compression. And it's all about file size when you have downloadable PDFs. You want to be able to email it, post it, and people not have a problem downloading it. So I like to keep it at 72, which is a low resolution, but it keeps the file size down. But you can bump this up when you export it as 72 and it's not super big in file size. You can increase the resolution and push that a little bit if you're okay with having a higher file size. But I'm going to stick with 72 for now. Medium right there in the middle is fine. And that's it. We're not going to really touch a whole lot. All we did was change it to pages. Export, you're going to see this warning. This document is using the CMYK blend space because we started it off as a print document. And colors are going to be converted to RGB. That is okay. It's going to automatically do that color conversion to that digital RGB space. That's okay. Just click OK. It just means there might be some slight shifting in colors. So here's our digital cookbook. And you can see the resolution's a little lower because we have a 72 dpi. But if you want to change that to 300 or 150 or something in the middle, if you're not really happy with how it looks. But most people are going to see it around this size. I think that's still an acceptable looking resolution. So now we have our digital PDF that people can scroll through and have their recipes. So we have a digital, we have a print, and I think we've covered a whole lot in this section and in this class. I want to teach you one more thing in InDesign, and how do I take all of this and share it with other people. Let's say I'm sharing it with a client, or I'm sharing it with another designer who wants to be able to open it in InDesign and have everything all linked up and ready to go. We're going to create and export a InDesign package for people to be able to send this entire project and share it with others.